Hello Year 6, it's Nicole again. This week I'm going to be giving you a literacy activity and it's all going to be based around this really cool book. And it's called Mysteries of Harris Berdych. And I've never seen this before until today, and I was looking for a really good book to share with you. And I came across this and it was really, really interesting, and it's really different to any other books that I've seen before.
Here's the introduction, written by the author. I first saw the drawings in this book a year ago, in the home of a man named Peter Wenders. Though Mr. Wenders is retired now, he once worked for a children's book publisher, choosing the stories and pictures that would be turned into books. 30 years ago, a man called at Peter Wenders' office, introducing himself as Harris Berdych. Mr. Berdych explained that he had written 14 stories and had drawn many pictures for each one. He'd brought with him just one drawing from each story to see if Mr. Wenders liked his work. Peter Wenders was fascinated by the drawings. He told Berdych he would like to read the stories that went with them as soon as possible. The artist agreed to bring the stories the next morning. He left the 14 drawings with Wenders, but he did not return the next day, or the day after that. Harris Berdych was never heard from again. Over the years, Wenders tried to find out who Berdych was and what happened to him, but he discovered nothing. To this day, Harris Berdych remains a complete mystery. His disappearance is not the only mystery left behind. What were the stories that went with these drawings? There are some clues. Berdych had written a title and a caption for each picture. When I told Peter Wenders how difficult it was to look at these drawings and their captions without imagining a whole story, he smiled and left the room. He returned with a dust-covered cardboard box. Inside were dozens of stories, all inspired by these same Berdych drawings. They had been written years ago by Wenders' children and their friends. I spent the rest of my visit reading these stories. They were remarkable, some bizarre, some funny, some downright scary. In the hope that other children will be inspired by them, the Berdych drawings are reproduced here for the very first time. So this book isn't a story in itself. It's a collection of 14 drawings with potential stories, and your job this week is going to be trying to create the stories that go along with the pictures. For your story, you can take inspiration from one of 3 of my favourite drawings from the book. The first one is this one, and the title of the story is Archie Smith, Boy Wonder. And the quote from the story is, "A tiny voice asked, 'Is he the one?'" The first thing I've noticed is the window is open. And because the quote is a voice and the child in bed is asleep, it makes me think that the voice is coming from someone stood outside the window. Is he the one? This tells me that whoever's saying this has been searching for this person. They know, they're looking for someone. What are they going to do? Are they going to take this child away from its bed? Is he the one? That tells me it's a boy. I can see this child's room. It's a nice room. I can see he likes sailing. Could that be part of the story? Who could the people talking outside the window be? Could they be good characters? Could they be bad characters? Might they be aliens? What are they going to do if they do take this boy away? If I look at the title of the story, I can inference that maybe the child is called Archie Smith. The second part of the title makes me think, Boy Wonder. Is there something special about him? The quote says a tiny voice. A tiny voice, that makes me think of someone young or someone vulnerable. Why would somebody with a small voice be talking about Archie in his bed? The next drawing you could choose is called Mr. Linden's Library. And the quote from the story says, "He warned her about the book. Now it was too late." And in the picture, I can see someone lying down, which I assume is the her we're talking about. And she's got a book in front of her. And I'm thinking this book must have been from Mr. Linden's library. And he had warned her. Maybe that's Mr. Linden. And there's something unusual about this book. It seems to have a plant growing from it. And this is making me think that there's something magical about this book. But he had warned her about the book and now it was too late. I wonder what he had warned her about. What's going to happen now? What is it too late to stop happening? What is growing out of that book? What did she do to make this happen? Why had she done it? And what's going to happen next? The last picture I've chosen is this one, and it's called The House on Maple Street. I thought this would be a really great starting point for a story, or an ending point. As you can see from the picture, you've got a house that seems to be taking off like a rocket. And the quote from the story says, "It was a perfect lift-off." How on earth did this house lift off? Are we living in a world where this is normal? Is this a story where houses can travel? Or is this a magical event that maybe is a secret? Maybe has never happened before? Maybe the family have been working very hard to create this great event. Where is the house going? Is it going up into space? Is it going to travel to a different country? And why? Why does it need to lift off? I wonder who might be living in this house. I wonder if there are aliens or monsters. And have they been living there in secret for a while? Did the neighbours know that this was about to happen? Now, I did an example story, and I chose The House on Maple Street. I started by planning the characters that I would have in the story. I started by thinking about who was going to be my main character, my protagonist. Now, remember, when you plan, it doesn't matter how you plan. I just got a scrap piece of paper and I started writing down my ideas. Here's my character plan. I have my protagonist, Mia, who loves space and lives on Maple Street, her twin sister, who she's very close to, dad and dog, and later on I added in that I wanted an Aunt Zoya character. I needed to then think about the structure of my story. I split it into 5 parts: opening, build-up, problem, resolution and ending, just like we do in class at school. I started by thinking, when in the story would the drawing be, the lift-off of the house? And I decided that it would be at the end of my story. That's going to be the final scene. Have a think of when you would like to have the scene in the drawing that you're taking inspiration from. Is it going to be the first thing that happens in your story? Or is it going to be in the middle? Or is it going to be the last thing that happens? As you can see, after I decided that was going to be the end, I started thinking about what the problem would be. And I decided that Mia wanted to go to space, but she doesn't want to leave her family. So that's how it ends up, that she takes her whole family and her house to space at the end of the story. I then went back to the beginning and I put in some details about how I was going to set the scene in the opening of the story and how it built up to that problem. And I decided that in the middle of the night, a small alien comes to the window and invites Mia to a planet. And as you can see, throughout my planning, I'm going back and looking at my character plan, adding characters in, changing things about characters. I decide that early on that it's all going to be about space, and I add that to my character plan. I decided that there should be a character that helps Mia get to space, and that character's in her family called Aunt Zoya. The last thing to do is to think about how I get from my problem to my ending, the resolution. And I decide to take inspiration from Roald Dahl's George's Marvellous Medicine. And here's my finished plan. As you can see, my resolution is that Mia gets a recipe, just like in George's Marvellous Medicine, from her aunt Zoya, which is telling her how to get the house to take off. I'm then planning to use lots of inspiration from Roald Dahl's George's Marvellous Medicine about how Mia practices this on stuffed animals and uses lots of things she can find in the house for this. I've also added a little bit of detail to my ending. She's going to tell her family what's going on just before liftoff. They're going to be scared, but before they can do anything, the house takes off. And then we have our final line, which is going to be, "It was a perfect liftoff." So that's a plan of my story finished. I've got the notes of what I want to happen in each section. I then went on to writing it. So I started with my build-up, and on my plan I have got that Mia and Layla are in the house on Maple Street and they come home from school to their dad and their dog. And that could be as short or as long as you want. I've written a whole page just for that section. I think it's really important to set the scene of the story and explain what kind of characters they are and their relationships between them. The house on Maple Street. "Layla, wait!" Mia screeched loudly, running to catch her much faster twin sister. "Mia, I don't wait for slowpokes," Layla teased as she jabbed Mia's panting ribs. "Look, I want to be home in time for Super City Adventures. It's on in 5 minutes. Mia rolled her eyes. Despite them being identical twins, they most definitely did not have identical interests. Layla loved superheroes, while Mia was a space specialist. When they arrived home, Gordon, their excitable Labrador, came rushing to greet them. Dad smiled and gave them both a hug. "How was school, girls?" he asked as Layla dashed off to sit in front of the TV. "Yeah, great, thanks. We learned all about Saturn today. It's the most amazing place," Mia gushed, as she helped her dad finish preparing dinner. So in this build-up, this opening scene, we see the relationship between the girls, we see the relationship between the girls and their dad, and we also see a little bit more about the characters. We know that Layla likes superheroes and Mia likes space. I've also been very careful about choosing descriptive language and different sentence structures which make the story cohesive. To help you notice some of these features, I've underlined them in different colours. I've underlined the reporting verbs, words instead of said, in red. I've used screeched, I've used teased, I've used asked, and I've used gushed at the end. I've also got lots of expanded noun phrases. To describe her twin sister, I've got her much faster twin sister, much faster being in brackets. Her panting ribs, a space specialist, excitable Labrador, underlined in green. I've got my subordinating conjunctions circled in orange. I haven't just done a simple sentence, I've joined them together to make it flow. In pink, I've got some verbs that I've chosen. I even changed one from ran, because I'd already used ran. I changed it to dashed, because it's more interesting instead of repeating the same verb. I've got jabbed, rushing, dashed. So think about that when you're writing your story. Think about extending your sentences, using starters and desserts just like we've done in class. Think about using a dictionary or the internet to look up descriptive language. Think about your verbs and your reporting verbs. And that's what I want to see in your stories. The next step for me would be to go on to writing the next 4 sections of the stories. I'd then go back and edit it. So now it's your turn. Choose one of these pictures to write your story about. And just like me, plan the characters, the 5 parts of your story, and then start to write. Make sure you're using all the features that we'd expect you to use as a Year 6 writer. You can post a photo of your finished story, or you can read it out loud. If you choose to type your story, make sure you've handwritten it first. Make sure your story is at least a couple of 100 words long. No shortcuts. I want to see your best Year 6 writing. This should not be an activity that only takes you an hour. You should be working on this all week.
Okay, now it's over to you. I can't wait to read the end of the week.